All right, we're bringing you in now, but I want you to watch this ad, and I want to put a blood pressure cuff on your arm, take your blood pressure reading afterwards, and then let you wax eloquent. So, Denver, play that ad for the audience, and we want to let Mark react to that.
Kamala Harris has spent decades fighting violent crime. As a border state prosecutor, she took on drug cartels and jailed gang members for smuggling weapons and drugs across the border. As vice president, she backed the toughest border control bill in decades. And as president, she will hire thousands more border agents and crack down on fentanyl and human trafficking. Fixing the border is tough. So is Kamala Harris.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
All right, Morgan. What's your blood pressure? And when you see that, talk to me. Because look, here's the thing. It's like, particularly on the Customs and Border agents, I love these guys. I love these women who put on the uniform. She has done nothing but abuse them, and now this. When you saw that, what's your thoughts? Talk to me.
Look, I think, Peter, we're in a whole new realm. We're way past DC spin, right? I mean, this is just laughable. It's blatant, intentional lying to the American people. And let's use her own words, right? When she was a state prosecutor, when she was then a senator, and then when she ran for president for the first time. These are her words, and you can Google this. Take 5 minutes.
This is the former commissioner of the United States Customs and Border Protection.
She wanted to abolish ICE. She referred to the hardworking men and women of ICE as equivalent to the KKK. And as she continued through her career, she's been a 100% supporter and defender of the vast set of open border policies. She has been supported to stop and end wall construction, which is an effective deterrent and part of a multi-layer strategy and a force multiplier. She was a full supporter of ending the Remain in Mexico program, which ended catch and release. And when they did that, they actually created the unimaginable chaos and lawlessness we've experienced for the past 3 years. Peter, I can keep going on and on. Remember, this is also the same woman that wanted free health care and free education for every single illegal alien. And now she's picked a vice president candidate that makes her look conservative on her liberal open border policies.
Mark, talk to me a little bit about the Customs and Border agents. How many of them are there? Where are they primarily based? What was the morale like during the Trump years? What is it like now? What? Tell us. Let's drill down a bit. Give us like the picture of what CBP looks like, what a day in the life of an agent looks like, what they're having to grapple with.
Yeah, that's a great question, Peter. I appreciate that. So it's an organization. It's the largest law enforcement organization in the United States. Over 63,000 personnel. It has a worldwide mission. It goes well beyond just securing our border. They play an integral role in facilitating the lawful trade and travel. In fact, CBP is the second large revenue collector for the United States, just outside the IRS. And their mission, look, they're like any other individual that wakes up every single day, puts a badge on their chest, and goes to work. They just want to do their job. And they want their leadership and their administration to give them the tools, the resources, and policies for them to do their job, to uphold the Constitution and protect the American people. It's that simple. And that's exactly what they were able to do under the Trump administration. You talked about Trump time. I love going in your office, and you have that clock on your wall that said Trump time. And that's what it was about. And under President Trump, he gave me, as the commissioner, a network of tools and authorities and policies that I could provide to the men and women so they could do their job. Under this administration, from day one, they dismantled that network of tools and authorities. They don't have the resources to do their job. They don't have the policies to do their job. And they know that every single day, that every aspect of our nation's safety and national security is being negatively impacted because this administration will not give them the tools and the policies and resources they need to do their job. And that's why their morale is the lowest I've ever seen it.
Mark, when you were the head of the agency, let's go to the southern border now. You get illegals streaming across. You catch them. Did you have anything like the busing programs that we see now that take these illegals to other states and provide it's a whole new set of infrastructure. Did that exist in some form when you were the head of CBP?
No, because we were actually enforcing a law. We actually are addressing the incentives. We are de-incentivizing illegal immigration. Here, break it down really simple. If someone that comes to our border illegally, if we process and release them in the United States, never to be heard from again, they're going to continue to come. And so we stopped that. We de-incentivized. We ended the catch and release through programs like the Remain in Mexico program. So they would come to our borders illegally, but we weren't releasing them. So there was no one to bus into other states throughout the country because we were removing them and they were waiting in Mexico while they were going through their asylum process. And when that happened, when we ended catch and release, you saw the volume of illegal migration plummet. By February, March of 2020, we had reduced illegal migration by over 85%, Peter, 85%. And on day one, this administration, they enacted, Biden and Harris working together, enacted over 94 executive orders that blew everything away. They stopped building the wall. They ended the Safe Third Country agreements we had with all three Northern Triangle countries, and they ended the Remain in Mexico program, which jump-started and reinstated the catch and release program. That's why we've had over 11 million total nationwide encounters and over 2 million known gotaways. Because right now, you come to our border, you're going to be processed and released, and you're going to get on a bus or a plane and be flown into every state in this country.
And where does the budget come from that? Does that come out of the CBP budget?
It absolutely does. So a couple of things happen. One, CBP has to reprogram funding. They fundamentally transformed their law enforcement and national security mission, Peter, to one of a processing enterprise. So what happens to facilitate that, you're going to have to reprogram. You're going to have to take funding away from that law enforcement national security mission and put it over to the processing enterprise part of this. Their strategy, their whole mission now is all about processing and releasing those that have illegally entered our country, never to be heard from again. And that's why I say, what people don't understand, when that happens, you pull limited resources off the front line away from that law enforcement national security mission. There are some sectors where 80 to 90% of agents are no longer on the front line doing their mission. They're relegated to administrative duties related to processing and releasing those that have illegally entered. And that's why in the cartels, we've handed operational control over the cartels because of that, to push drugs, criminals, and national security threats into this country every single day for the past 3.5 years.
So during the Trump administration, once we got the Safe Third Nation thing in place, was it the case that if an illegal actually got across the border, they could be returned to Mexico under Safe Nation?
Yeah, so that's exactly right. So because individuals were exploiting the system. And so the law is very clear. If you transit through a country that can provide you relief, first of all, that's the international standard. We should all want to support someone that has a valid asylum claim to seek relief in the first safe third country that can provide that. So if they transited through one of those safe third countries and got to our border, we would send them back to that country that they transited through, who would then give them a asylum process and relief if it was warranted. And the others that came, if they didn't transverse through one of those safe third countries, then we use the Remain in Mexico program to have them wait in Mexico while they were going through the asylum process. At the end of the day, the whole design was to stop releasing them in the United States, de-incentivize them from coming, and it worked.
So this is really important, I think, because I think people, let's see if I got this right now. So in Trump world, once we got the Safe Third Nation
and the Remain in Mexico
and Remain in Mexico in place, I remember I was in the Oval with White House legal counsel Pat Cipollone the day the president decided to use tariffs to basically force Mexico and the Northern Triangle countries to adopt that. Okay, so once those were in place, if somebody came across the border, if they were a Mexican citizen, send them back to Mexico. Let's say they were from El Salvador. Could you then how would you get them back to El Salvador? Is that
so there's a Yeah, so we use a combination of the Safe Third Agreement and Remain in Mexico program. Yeah. Under the Remain in Mexico program, we are actually sending back all Spanish-speaking countries to Mexico while they're waiting through their asylum. So it was beyond just Mexico. But
and then Mexico would handle it on their end.
Correct. And then if regardless of the country, if you transited through one of those safe third countries, we were sending you back. Like, for example, if you went through Guatemala, didn't claim for asylum, came to a border, it didn't matter what country you came from, we were sending you back to Guatemala. Now, there were some countries that Guatemala didn't want to take. Well, that's okay. We were detaining those individuals, right, while they went through the process, and we would remove them afterwards.
Let's say somebody, well, we're going to come back, but to finish the thought, so the difference is, in Trump world, if they came across the border, they got sent back somewhere. Okay.
They weren't being released. That's the key.
And on day one, Biden-Harris signed a bunch of executive orders that basically reinstituted the catch and release. In other words, if they got across the border, if an illegal got across the border, then they'd be released, often with accommodations, often to a red state. All right, when we come back, Mark, we're going to keep talking about this. I'm Peter K. Navarro in with the former head of Customs and Border Protection, exposing the lunacy of the Kamala Harris ad where she claims she's tough on the border. We'll be right back.
See if I can continue this without much
just $19
interruption.
When you donate to...
All right, let's talk a little bit about the IRS before we get back to the border. Let's remember Kamala Harris was a tie-breaking vote, giving you a ton of new agents to come after you, and the IRS does not forget. If you owe back taxes, those interest and penalties just keep piling up. You need someone in your corner like the Tax Network USA. Tax Network USA can resolve your IRS problems quickly and in your favor. They have preferred direct line. Schedule your free consultation now. .com/eloquently explained how in Trump land, illegal came over, they were sent back. In Kamala Harris land, they were catched, then released, and then often paid to go to red states and get Medicare and all of that stuff, okay? The next thing, Mark, I'd like to go over with is kind of the flow. We have certainly millions of illegal, illiterate aliens flooding into our labor markets, driving down wages, stealing jobs. But in addition, we got murderers, rapists, we got drug cartels, we got human traffickers, we got Islamic terrorists, we got Chinese spies, and whatever else. Explain the problems with that and what you're seeing coming in that is actually endangering our lives right here in America, in our houses and on the streets, sir.
Yeah, Peter. So this is why it's so important what you were focused on it before, the whole catch and release issue, because that was one of the biggest incentives. It's either a de-incentive or it is an incentive. And in the Trump administration, because we ended catch and release, meaning we no longer were releasing people into our country, they stopped coming. That's their goal. They want to be released in the United States, never be heard from again. It's that simple. Well, since this administration, because they reversed all those policies, that's acted as a magnet, as an incentive to the entire world. Over the past 3.5 years, we've received illegal aliens from 180 different countries. There's only 195 recognized countries in the face of the planet. And we also know that we've received almost 11 million total nationwide encounters, plus another 2 million known gotaways. Think about that. In 3.5 years, 13 million illegal aliens have been encountered or gotten away, and now the majority of them are in our country. And to put that in perspective, let me give you a couple of stats. During that same time period, Border Patrol has apprehended over 50,000 criminals. 50,000. That includes murderers, rapists, pedophiles, aggravated felons, and gang members. At the same time period, Border Patrol has apprehended over 380 illegal aliens on the FBI terror watch list. They've also intercepted well over 100,000 what we call special interest aliens that come from countries that we know sponsor, harbor, and facilitate terrorism, from Iraq, from Pakistan, Syria. The list goes on and on.
Damn.
That's who we've apprehended. Now think about that, the 2 million known gotaways. In addition to that, Peter, the fact is that we do not have the capability to actually vet all those that we're encountering. So those 11 million that we've encountered, many of these come from countries we have no diplomatic relationships with. So we're not getting their criminal background from their home country. We don't know whether they're a known terrorist from their home country, but yet we're still releasing them and in their country. And this administration and Vice President Harris has been leading the charge, lying to the American people, saying that everybody we encounter, we properly vet to ensure they're not a threat. That's just a lie.
We're screwed.
So I think it's fair to say here that in Trump land, in Trump's America, the murderers and the rapists were turned back. The human traffickers, the drug cartels were turned back from this country. The Islamic terrorists, the Chinese communist spies, and I'd like to get your thoughts on the surge of those coming in, were all turned back. And what was, I think, important that you mentioned about this is that once people understand that they're going to wind up stuck in Mexico or going back to where they came, then they stop coming. It's the whole incentive. So now we're in Kamala Harris land, and it's catch and release with limousine travel to the red state of your choice and the hotel accommodations and free medical care. That's their policy. Let's be honest about this, Kamala. That's your policy.
It is.
That's your policy, Kamala. It's like, come on in and just go spread around those red states, get your driver's license, register to vote, and then turn that red state blue. I mean, that's the agenda. That's what it is. And Mark Morgan's point here is that amongst that flow is that they're very, very, very dangerous people. So, Mark, even if the ad says she's going to add a bunch of new border patrol, right? She's turned the border patrol into chaperones for dangerous people. That's what it is. Let me say that again. Kamala Harris has turned the Customs and Border Patrol into chaperones and limo drivers for the worst collection of trash coming across our border that are going to murder and rape American citizens. And okay, so that all seems extreme when we talk about it. The problem, Mark, is it's true. Is it not, sir?
It is true. And look, this is what I keep saying. Nothing is perfect. We were never going to be able to get the numbers down to zero. But what I say on the Trump administration, we had the most secure border in our lifetime. And to give a couple of statistics to your point, the 50,000 criminals, murderers, rapists, pedophiles, aggravated felons that have been encountered by Border Patrol, that's a 99% increase from FY17 and 20 combined of the Trump administration. The 380 illegal aliens on the FBI terror watch list, compare that to all 4 years of the Trump administration, that number was 14. So yes, with the reason being, and again, illegal immigration was down by 85%. Why? Because we stopped releasing them in the United States. Fewer came, which meant more resources on the front line to do their law enforcement and national security mission to defend and protect this country. That's the fact. And when you remove that, when you reinstated catch and release, that's what incentivized millions to come. Our resources are overwhelmed. They're pulled off the front line. They're relegated to being the federal travel agencies. You said we had operational control over the cartels so they could push criminals, drugs, and national security threats. We haven't even talked about the drugs. Last year, 108,000 Americans died from drug overdose or poisoning in a 12-month period. That's more Americans than died from all the terrorist attacks in Iraq and Afghanistan and Vietnam wars combined, Peter.
Mark, let me. I mean, the thing that really pisses me off about Kamala Harris's Kamala ad on the border is his claim that she's somehow going to stop people dying from fentanyl. I mean, fentanyl is killing close to 100,000 Americans. And a little quick story, like everybody knows, I got out of prison I was in there for defending the Constitution. Sitting around at lunch one day with a group of inmates, all of whom had been sentenced and in jail for dealing drugs. And the conversation was about how much cheaper street drugs are now during Harris-Biden because the border's so open. So when Kamala Harris says she's going to do something to stop fentanyl from killing Americans, I mean, that pisses me off. Thoughts, sir?
It does. Look, I was also in the FBI for 20 years. She's talking about how tough she was on prosecution. That's a joke, right? We have been going after using the same traditional prosecutorial method to go after the cartels for 30 years, and it's failed for 30 years. The only thing that's happened is the cartels have gotten stronger, more powerful, and more influential. We have to fundamentally change how we go after the cartels. I don't care what you label them terrorists or not. I think there's pros and cons to that. But what we need to do is go after them in the same way, the same whole of government approach that we do terrorist organization. And I subscribe to A.G. Barr's Plan Colombia type. That means using a precision surgical military kinetic operations to go to the heart of the cartels. Because the reality is, Mexico, they're not a true ally. They're not our true partner, and they haven't been. They don't have the political will, nor do they have the capacity now to actually go and defeat the cartels. That's why we need to do it ourselves to protect our nation.
All right, look, Mexico has got its own extremist politics. And I think one of the big concerns we have with the Kamalas and Walshes of the world is that we're moving left. In 60 seconds, and then before we get to the next segment, tell me about Minnesota as a sanctuary state and Tim Walz as governor and how it ranks relative to other states and that.
I think this is important because as far left as Kamala Harris policies have been, again, when she was a state prosecutor, a senator, a former presidential candidate, and vice president, she has been leading the charge some of the most liberal, progressive, open border policies and strategies that we've seen in our lifetime. And what does she do in a vice presidential candidate? Pick someone that's more left on the borders than she is. This is a man who has given out a driver's license to illegal aliens so they should get free in-state college tuition, give them free health care, and has absolutely promoted becoming a sanctuary state. Peter, look, at the end of the day, there's no doubt in my mind, this ticket, Harris and Walz, we won't have a sanctuary city or state. We're going to have a sanctuary country.
Boom! As Bannon might say. We'll be right back. We're going to bring on a former Customs and Border Patrol agent with Mark Morgan to talk about what it means from an agent's point of view.
Israel, 25 years. Go to 4
Aid and discounts for seniors.
Trump, and then under Biden-Harris for the first 7 months before they decided that they didn't like anybody who was actually going to be a Border Patrol agent. And that's Rodney Scott. So, Chief Scott, welcome to the War Room.
Border Patrol agent under Trump and Border Patrol agent under Biden-Harris.
Well, thank you for having me on, Peter. You know, that ad would actually be laughable if there wasn't so much at stake for our country. It is so unbelievably misleading. You know, she prosecuted cases in California because they were forced down her throat by state and local law enforcement, and she really couldn't walk away from them. I think it's important to point out one of the law enforcement officers, a sheriff, in that ad has come out publicly said he does not support her. This ad is misleading. She fought against the wall. She fought for sanctuary cities. She wants to decriminalize illegal immigration. You know, all the facts are out there for Americans to see if they look at it and they look for it or they watch shows like yours. But unfortunately, a lot of people out there in the middle, you know, they're going to watch that ad and they're going to actually think she's tough on the border. But let's get down to the bottom line. Even today, when she talks about border security, she conflates that with immigration policy. And she stated recently, comprehensive immigration reform is the cure, if you will. You know, bad policy makes it completely impossible to secure the border. Good policy makes it easier, but securing the border isn't immigration policy. It's simply making sure we have the capability to know and control who and what is entering our national home. Harris has a track record, and so does her new running mate, of actually doing tons of things to fight against that, to make it harder for Border Patrol to actually secure the border. And she talks about, you know, every other country in the world and trying to make it better for them. She never talks about protecting America or putting Americans first.
So If you're a line agent now, a Customs and Border Patrol on the front lines, and you see that ad, what is your morale like after 4 years in Biden-Harris land and then hearing that crap from Kamala?
Yeah, so I didn't think it could get any worse, but it probably is. And let me clarify. My entire career, I was a U.S. Border Patrol agent, wore that green uniform. But Mark represents Customs and Border Protection, the bigger organization. That includes the CBP officers at the ports of entry. And I'm pretty good friends with a lot of them still. I actually was just talking to one this morning in a leadership position. And he was explaining to me how devastated morale is, because they understand and know, whether it's a green uniform, a blue uniform, or tan uniform, the threats that this nation faces every single day, and the fact that they're missing those threats because this administration has forced them to process administrative immigration cases that really have no merit. And that takes them away from enforcement duties for about 2 hours if they're at a port of entry for every single illegal alien that the Biden administration and now the Harris administration wants to bring into this country. So anybody that says they know that her saying she's going to fight fentanyl, it's not true, because she has made decisions to take hundreds of thousands of man hours away from fentanyl enforcement, away from patrolling the border, and process these fraudulent asylum cases.
And then let them in.
Couldn't be any lower.
So you were there for the first 7 months of Biden-Harris. Can you talk a little bit about how they put you in a box because you actually wanted to enforce the law, but also whether you saw this beginning process of catch and release where they began to turn CBP and your agents into like chauffeurs for illegals to places like red states? Can you give us some perspective on that, sir?
Sure. So let me back up a little bit. I want to be transparent. I was naive when the Biden administration came into power. I had spent a lot of my career in California. I'd spent a lot of time talking to people that walked through my door, open border advocates, talking all about the immigrants. And pretty consistently, when they looked at the facts and evidence, they would walk away and say, hey, you know what? We need border security. This stuff is important. So I honestly thought that the Biden administration would come in and it'd be the same process. But to say I was naive, I thought that their campaign rhetoric was just probably rhetoric, and that they didn't really want to shut down detention and actually start releasing people, because we explained to them in detail through the transition, and then I explained to them in detail once they came on board, historically, what the ramifications would be of that we would be inundated with this massive influx of illegal aliens, and how that would transition the control over who and what comes into the country, meaning decision making, would go to the cartels instead of the U.S. government. They didn't want to hear anything about it. Anytime it was brought up, they literally got angry and stymied the conversation. But I continued, and my team continued to explain to them as politely as possible facts and evidence that I still today believe are apolitical. That you cannot have a country if you don't have a secure border, and we need to know who and what's coming into this country. And we had a plan that was actually getting better and better for 27 years as bipartisan, that the Trump administration strongly supported, and then this administration was walking away from it. So more and more we had clashes left and right. But at the end of the day, when they wanted me to lie to America and tell America that all the aliens were being COVID tested, that they were being vetted before they were released, and I refused to actually go along with that, that was kind of the beginning to the end. And I was ostracized, and then they were going to reassign me to another position.
And when you say is this Mayorkas at the top of kind of like the chain down to you? Was it the new head of CBP? Was it from the White House itself? We like to name names here so we know who we're dealing with. It sounds like a deep state, but real people make decisions. Like, who were you having to interact with that brought in this new kind of organizational culture to your agency and turned it again into chauffeurs for illegal aliens?
Sure. So it was more like vague than ever before, but I put the blame at the top. At the end of the day, we elect a president and a vice president, and they put staff in place. Yeah. So on a day in and day out basis, we were interacting, or I personally was interacting with political appointees like the chief of staff at CBP, like Secretary Mayorkas. But I watched Secretary Mayorkas sit in meetings and then basically agree with me on things and then later completely flip. So was he the liar that I believe he is today, and that he really has no actual like set position or beliefs on anything, and he just goes with the direction of the wind? Or was he lying to me from the get-go? You know what? I don't know, Peter, but this is what I do know. There's a lot of people in Washington, D.C., especially what we've seen with Biden lately, behind that curtain. I'll name names, people like Susan Wright, Roberta Jacobson, Lise Clavel, a guy named Blas Nieto, that were totally open border, told me to my face that they didn't trust the Border Patrol, they didn't like our mission, they didn't believe in the mission, and that they were going to do everything they could to create safe and orderly pathways to get more migrants into the United States.
I just can't wrap my head around. If I'm like a Border Patrol agent who for many years in my work, I go in and my job is to police the border and send illegals back, and suddenly the paradigm shifts and it's like I am simply kind of escorts, chauffeurs for these illegals. I can't imagine what the morale must be like, what goes through their heads. There must be a lot of attrition now. There must be a lot of early retirements. Do we have any insight into kind of what's going on in the agency in terms of its deterioration and prospects?
We do, and you touched on a couple, but I think the problems are even deeper. So over 4,000 agents have chose to retire. Many of them chose to retire early under this last administration because they literally, some have stated flat out, they feel like they're complicit in the smuggling currently, and they can't do anything. Some have actually left just to speak out. But Peter, think about this for a minute. Those that have stayed have literally had the crap beat out of them for 3.5 years to not enforce the law, that they are illegal immigration processing, and that's it. I worry that when we do get a new administration, you know, we've got like 3.5 years of complacency to kind of like to re-energize these guys and make sure that when they do deploy to the border, that they're safe. We've brought in a bunch of new agents over the last 3 years that they don't even know what border enforcement is, and we're going to have to retrain them.
Hey, Peter, can I jump in here real quick?
Yeah.
So I know this is going to something that we'll get Rodney fired up. We agree on this. We've been saying this phrase for a very long time, that border security is synonymous with national security. And Rodney, I know you were championing this, and I know you were pushing the Biden administration on this heavily before they forced you out. How I feel right now, under Biden-Harris, our border are more vulnerable now than they were prior to 9/11. What's your thoughts?
Mark, I 100% agree. And you know, at the end of the day, when we talk about those 50,000 criminals you talked about, the vast majority of those are U.S. records. They've been in the U.S. before, committed a crime, left, and came back. We don't have a global database on crime. At the end of the day,